Yay! We're live.
Hello.
We're back again with
We
myself
are.
and the lovely, gorgeous Lenny Ray.
Thank you.
Yes, we're back for another fun-filled hour. Well, we're going to talk about the stuff that really underpins all of the other stuff we've been talking about, which is mental health. And welcome to the two people who are currently watching. Do say hello. We don't bite. Well, I might do, but there's a screen between us, so you're quite safe. Yeah, mental health and how it colours everything. And it can creep up on you as well without you necessarily realising it. You just a lot of people will suddenly get to a point and they're kind of like, things aren't right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It can be all sorts of things that bring it on. Oh, we've got Chris Tyler. Hello. And we have
Hi, Chris.
Leanne.
Hi, Leanne.
Nice to see you. Yeah. It's a beautiful evening here. I've got the sort of wispy clouds and the sun has set. You know, it's all very beautiful. And as Lenny was saying to me about 2 minutes before we started, leaves are out on trees, ducklings are on the stream. Spring has sprung, and Lainey hasn't been able to bloody enjoy it, which is very unfair.
No, not yet. Not yet.
Mm.
Fingers crossed. I phoned them today, but it's still not. They're still not in stock. I was like,
But this is your lifeline. Your it's your lifeline, and you know, for your mental health, you know that being out in nature is about as healing as it can get. So it's just
When I go out with the camera, I disappear. Like nothing bothers it. I'm not aware of anything. I'm just looking through the lens at whatever amazing piece of nature is there, and so you know all those worries disappear, kind of thing. It helps a lot. Hi, Paula.
I'm being rude here. Because this is an example of what Lainey can do. Yeah, beautiful swan.
Yeah.
Right, it got knocked off its perch, and I wasn't prepared to have it damaged. But that is an extraordinary picture. I've not seen many swans this year. I think they've all buggered off somewhere else.
That's Hazel. I named the swans beside me.
This is Hazel.
It's Hazel.
I do think that some people have a very, very strong connection with swans. I have another dear friend who absolutely has formed quite a close bond with some swans at a pond near her, and she's not in the best of health on so many levels, but for her it gives her an absolute lifeline to have that connection with something in nature that is not judging, isn't a person. I think possibly is the good thing.
When you watch them, they just get on with it, no matter what, don't they? Like, you know, they just get on with it. Like, I mean, obviously they don't have the brain capacity we do, I guess, but like, they're just life. They just get on with it.
I mean, you kind of think is a good thing to actually not have that brain capacity, because our brains are so incredibly powerful and can do so much, but how often do they actually get turned against us and used as a sort of a weapon against ourselves, rather than engaging with the world and actually getting out there and being in contact with it? It's all about judging yourself and being down on yourself, thinking I'm not good enough and I'm not this and I'm not that, and comparing yourself to other people. Just epic fails, really, in what humanity's about.
Yeah. Swans hate me. I'm sure they don't.
Well, they can get aggressive when they've got young. It's true, they get very territorial.
Yeah. Well, they don't like dogs or any other animals, and so a lot of people tend to go and, well, at least in my local, they tend to go near the pond, and then their dog's like up on the wall, and of course, you know, the swan's kind of like, no, mate.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? So
I mean, that's a predator, isn't it? A dog. So
yeah.
Especially when they've got little ones. Now, Leanna's interestingly said, and you may have answered this before, said, isn't there a replacement, kind of like a temporary hire, like you do when you prang your car? You get a courtesy car or courtesy robo bitch, or kind of a hire thing when she's not about.
Not from electric one, because it's specified. See, I have to have the legs a certain way because I've got lipedema and lymphedema. Normally the foot plate's in the centre, but mine is sort of up and at the sides because I can't put my legs that far
Yeah.
in. So I do have a manual one, but I feel like it's going to collapse any second. The second, I'm sitting in it, and I just feel like it's going to collapse. And my daughter tried to move me in it, even just in the house, and it was a nightmare, absolute nightmare. So
So
yeah,
it's really being built specifically for you. It's almost a one of a kind thing.
yeah.
And that's probably why they're having difficulty getting hold of the bloody parts.
Well, it's because the parts they have to order from abroad, and it was kind of like Brexit and COVID's problem, apparently. But
Yeah, it's made it a lot worse. Yeah.
But never mind. Never mind.
Yeah, well.
I was thinking about just as we were talking there before we came live, and I was thinking, because I said, "Oh, I haven't done any notes." My first thought was how mental health was viewed years ago. I thought maybe if we started there, that might be a good place. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And although I'm old, I'm not that old. I don't really.
Yeah.
Way back in history. But yeah, I mean, the idea that if somebody, wasn't behaving what they thought normally, they'd literally just sling him in the nut house. Really, I mean, that was the answer.
Yeah. And then they did things like electrocution therapy, didn't there? And
yeah. ECT, isn't it? Electroconvulsive therapy. They obviously thought they were doing a good thing, but man, how barbaric!
Very, very barbaric.
A lot of treatments that they thought were okay to do on people who they thought weren't quite the ticket. It's like, you can't do that.
Yeah, I suppose it must have been hard to live in those days, because it's funny, isn't it? Because we have all these different body parts and physical things, insides, outsides, whatever. But yet when it comes to your brain, it's not allowed to have the same kind of issues, if you know what I mean. It's not allowed to have an issue, like, in a way, or at least that's how they viewed it back then.
Yeah, exactly. Because it didn't have an immediate, if you remove this, then this happens. And there was a time when were quite happy to try and remove bits of people's brains. Generally not now. But it's the idea, really, that especially, I mean, again, we're back to, but women in particular were thought to be hysterical, or, that somehow they were nutty just because they weren't being logical in a very male-defined way.
Yeah.
Or someone wanted to, I don't know, ditch their missus and marry someone else. They literally had the current wife certified insane and carted off to the asylum. Yeah. That actually is not as unfeasible as you'd think. Even in this day and age, there are people that will try and do that. And I know someone for whom someone tried to do that. So we're not as far away from all of these things as we think we are.
That's madness, isn't it, when you think about it, even in this day and age? And I mean, there is still stigma. There is definitely still stigma, no matter what, and yet our brain needs help just the same as every other part of us that isn't working properly at that time.
Exactly. And things that are chemical imbalances, and obviously certain mental health situations are down to a chemical imbalance, can be treated with those chemicals. But other stuff seems to be a lot more difficult to treat. It's not just, take this tablet and it'll make everything all right. Very rarely works that way. Even people who have things like bipolar and stuff like that will have to try a variety of different treatments before they find the one that actually helps them keep balance.
Definitely.
Yeah. And the same's true for antidepressants, of course, which most people at some point in their lives have probably had. But again, they're only meant to be used for very short term. So if someone's on them for a long time, that creates its own problems too.
Yeah. But I also feel that sometimes that's the answer for the doctors, though. You know what I mean? They just give you tablets.
Exactly. They're not going to sit there and encourage the patient to talk about what's going on in their life, because a lot of depression is reactive to very understandable pressures, situations, and all the other stuff, the bereavements, the relationships, the other stuff that we've covered going on, which when it starts to pile up can create what looks like something very wrong in the brain, but it truly isn't. It's a reaction to what's going on. And it doesn't necessarily require medication, apart from perhaps as a holding pattern while the person is able to go and get other therapies to get themselves sorted out. It's very complicated, and I think doctors just shy away from anything that has a psychological component. They just don't seem to have the understanding. They're not trained in it properly, I don't think, not by a long shot.
Leanne saying, I remember my granny having nerve medicine in the 60s. Don't know what it was for. And my mother-in-law had a breakdown in the 80s and had electric shock treatment. Was still going in the 80s. That's really recent, isn't it? I didn't. Well, it's what, 40 years ago.
Yeah, it's not so recent, but it's recent enough.
It feels recent. It's like when you, yeah, it like feels like it should only be 20 years ago when you say 80s, doesn't it?
Well, it does for me, yes. But, yes, I'm vintage and retro, don't you know?
but that is it's shocking. So do you think with mental health, when there's one that's a chemical imbalance, is that because my son's got ADHD, and that's classed as a chemical imbalance, and I know that there's other things, but do you think that all art's just actually a case of the fact that they don't know exactly which chemical imbalance, because the brain, and I was watching a program, is so complex, and they still don't know. They only know about, what, 5% of it altogether, really, and how it works and stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of research going on. I mean, there's a lot of research going on, but as you say, it's so vast, and it's very difficult to pin anything down because, again, you know, two people aren't necessarily going to be the same. There can be all kinds of causes for things, and they all get very focused on, you know, fixing something and symptoms, and you know, the whole medical thing of this is what's wrong, this is what you do to combat it, and this is the recovery process. Often for people, it's managing their mental health, and kind of learning to live with it in some way, and so that it doesn't stop them living a full and enjoyable life. It isn't necessarily a case of just necessarily chucking medication at it.
Yeah. Also, it's like when you come to say autism, my nephews are autistic. Well, two of them are actually. So with autism, see, it's hard to explain because to me there's like two types of mental health in a way. So there's mental health with like depression and anxiety and panic attacks and stuff like that, and then there's a sort of, and I don't know what the difference is or how you would explain it, but would that be more mental illness? Would that be more
possibly? Yes, I mean, they're the things that can go sort of fairly badly wrong, and they might be wiring issues, there might be chemical issues, there might be something to do with something that someone's born with. Those are things that I guess they're more defined so that they find it, you know, the research goes into trying to fix things. And obviously the diseases that people get that affect their neurons and their mind and their bodies as well, that's a whole nother area, I think. I mean, the kind of mental health I suppose we're much more dealing with, and even something like autism is, you know, that's on a spectrum, isn't it? It literally has a range.
Well, ADHD is in that spectrum as well, so
and it's easy to give a label to something that is a collection of symptoms that may not be what they're saying it is. It's just a way of trying to classify things and order them. But yeah, I mean, certainly things like, as you say, the anxiety and the lack of confidence, the phobias and the things that stop you actually living a full life. I wouldn't say that was mental illness. I would say that is an issue of mental health, which can be restored. Exactly. Receptor issue. Yeah.
Yeah.
So. Yeah.
So mental illness to mental health being different then, you know what I mean?
Distinctions, yeah, there are distinctions. But again, they're just labelling symptoms, so nothing is ever cut and dried, as they'd like to be.
No, true. I mean, I've suffered with depression, I've suffered with anxiety, panic attacks, and body dysmorphia. And But like to me, I'm fine. The body dysmorphia is fine. I mean, I'm not in any depression at the moment or anything. My anxiety, I still get it for extreme, an extreme case, like for things that are normal to being anxious about. Like if you were going for an interview, or obviously I've got a, um, I've got an operation next month, so
You have.
obviously that a little bit of anxiety for that. You know what I mean? Haven't had a
Understand.
panic attack for a long time, which I'm thankful for because they're horrendous.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's and then obviously you've got the sort of disorders, don't you? You go down like is it bipolar, and which used to be called manic depressive, didn't it?
Yeah, they often sort of try and relabel things, and
Yeah,
obviously
and
that's
now
one of
it's
the
bipolar,
symptoms. Yeah,
which
that is one of the symptoms. It isn't all of it. And
Stephen
again,
Fry
different
has,
people have
doesn't
different
he?
things. Mm.
Stephen Fry has bipolar. I remember him doing
A lot of people do. Yes,
a thing about it. So that's when you have like extreme highs and extreme lows, isn't it? So
exactly. Yeah, it's yeah. But there are many. It doesn't always follow the classic what people think what they see on
no,
TV.
nothing does it? Because a lot of there's a certain thing. Everyone has their own different things as well, don't they? So
Yeah. That's what people know about it, is the ups, is the highs and the lows. But there are many other things that can happen.
yeah,
That really can make someone's life a misery. But we have a few people in here. I haven't said hello to Lisa J. I haven't said hello to Chrissy Bond, and we have 420 in here, which is fine. But any more comments out of order, you will be blocked. Just be warned. Okay, so moving on. Yeah, it's. Lisa says, me and my other half were just talking about the events of the last 2 years and how much this has affected everyone. Yeah. Lost the plot stressing over the lurgy, but after having it, I'm fine with it. Funnily enough, yeah, the fear of it is often worse. Hello, Joan. The
that's
fear of
very
it is
true,
often
isn't it?
worse.
Hi,
Yeah.
John.
A lot of people have had it now, particularly since things have opened up again. It seems to have sort of had a bit of a going through the population at a rate of knots.
Yeah,
But in terms of how it's affected people's mental health, I think it's had a massive impact, and really there's a lot more issues for people now than there were before, because it's brought stuff to the surface, I think.
yeah. I think part of that panic of it was just that all this there was it was everywhere, wasn't it? You couldn't get away from it, like on every channel, on every newspaper, and it was all the just rubbish that was put in as well. Oh, if you do this will happen, and if you do that'll happen, and
Oh,
and
yeah.
there was so many people, like scaremongering, I guess is the word, isn't it? And
Yeah,
the
there were a lot
effect
of very
that was
frightened people.
yeah, the effect that was having on the public, because I think what happened was a lot of people got to the point where they were like reading every bit of news that was available, and
Yeah.
I think it became too much in the end. I mean, I stopped. I just stopped. I stopped looking at anything. I stopped watching the news. I just had to, because it was too much. You know
Yeah,
what I
I mean,
mean?
there was an information overload, particularly when there's a captive audience, and that was all
Yeah,
people could do was get on a screen and try and
yeah,
see what was going on in the world. But fear is one of those things that is actually contagious. It is very easily spread. So,
yeah,
and that's exactly what happened. They sowed the fear, which it spread incredibly easy. And then when it's time to sort of try and allay that fear and reduce it, it's a lot slower to go. I know many people now who are still quite nervous. I mean, they've got good reason to be. They may be physically vulnerable, have conditions that still make them vulnerable. There are still people shielding. There are a few million people in this country that still are doing that shielding thing, and they're
yeah.
petrified.
I
So,
think I probably was one of them people who should have shielded but didn't. But
yeah,
I just I had carers coming in anyway. Like there was a lot of people in and out, and I just thought I need to get out. I need to get out to be able to deal with what was going on,
yeah,
and you know what I mean. And even though it was just down the park and back, it just gave me that thing that I needed to escape from it all. And I mean, I did end up getting it twice. You know what I mean? But it's just it and it was horrendous. But it, as you said, the fear of it is
Yeah,
always a lot worse, I think.
I think for the vast majority of people, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, Susan Bad Wolf is in. Hello, hello,
Hi,
hello.
Susan. Hi, Lisa.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And there are a lot of people who won't go out as much as they used to, because the thing is, if your confidence gets knocked that much, it's really hard to get it back. People have got to try and move you forward, and some people just can't go there. They're very stuck in it and were very susceptible to the fear that was sown. And the media has a lot to answer for. Indeed, they do, because fear is what gets people's attention. And they wanted the media to be consumed, and that's what happened. So I think it's quite a salutary lesson about making your own mind up about things, doing your own research, and then deciding for yourself what you feel is appropriate, and whatever the consequences of that, taking it. I still can't quite believe that I never had it. Just because I was out and about and being sensible, but I never quite. Maybe it's just me. I just sort of stuff it. I need to get out. I'm not staying in. But yeah, it wouldn't be pleasant if I've got it, but if I did catch it. But it's like there's so many other things in life too. And I'm of reasonable health, so technically I'm old enough to be a bit of a hazard.
Yeah.
I don't know, but yeah, it didn't affect my mental health too bad. I guess I'm probably a bit nuts anyway. Maybe that's what it was. But I just know so many people whose world became narrowed down, and then the fear was just like an extra cage around them.
Yeah, I think, and as you said, it's still affecting so many people even now, which must be putting pressure on the mental health services, which weren't coping in the first place. So yeah,
there's a real issue with young people as well. And I know, again, I've got a friend whose daughter has, suffice it to say, really, really needs the service of, they call it CAMS. It's the Young People's Mental Health Service, which most people may or may not be aware of. They, even back in the day when I used to work with teenagers, in a drugs awareness thing, anyway, long story, but I worked with a lot of very vulnerable teenagers. Even then, it was incredibly difficult to get anyone assessed or get the right kind of help, especially if they were sort of between 16 and 18, because somehow nobody really wanted to know, which was awful. And yet now it's so much worse.
Yeah.
And everyone's, young people are resilient, young people are this, that, and the other. Well, everybody's resilient, but to expect a child to have adult levels of resilience is naive, to say the least. And I really, really think they have to crack that and sort that out.
Yeah, it definitely needs to be. I mean, I don't know what can be done, but something needs to change in terms of the health mental health care services available for people, because it just isn't enough.
No, it definitely needs more investment, more expertise, and more of a willingness to actually step in and do something before it becomes so much of a problem that you're practically dealing with people who are trying to kill themselves. And that's true, not just in young persons, that's true across the board. People shouldn't have to get to that stage before they get sensible help and guidance and resources.
Definitely. I think most of the Hi Sylvia. I think most of the chat are blaming the media in the fee. Well, that's what they want. They do dramatic headlines to sell papers, isn't it? That's when it comes down to, isn't it? That's what.
Well, yes. That keeps them in jobs and prevents their fear, I suppose. The NHS in general has sadly always been a victim of mismanagement and wastage, and not enough for the right people on the front lines. That's historically been the case, even when I worked within it back in the early 2000s.
Yeah,
the waste was phenomenal. The sheer level of incompetence and I'll say it on here because it's my channel, absolute fuckwittery of the highest order. I wouldn't say it on your channel, but I'm saying it because I don't
No,
know.
you would be allowed on mine and all.
But, I mean, it was beyond all belief. There was more money being thrown at the NHS at that time than ever had before. And it was literally like just flushing it down the toilet. I
saw it. I
Yeah.
saw it. I mean, I was in there. I spent 6 months in hospital, and they would give me tablets for something to fix something, but then the order wouldn't stop. So once the thing had stopped and I didn't need it anymore, I'd still be getting the tablets and stuff sent from the pharmacy in the hospital, which then couldn't be used for anyone else, even though I hadn't touched them, which sent mental.
Wastage.
And then they would hire equipment from a medical company, which to me, they should have certain restrictions on how much they can charge, because the charges is absolutely mental. So they were hiring commodes because I was getting back out of bed again. So I think they tried 3 different ones, and they were all just shoved in a corner, and they were still on hire for months. They brought in this overhead hoist thing that I never used. That was there from the day I was in till the day I left the side room. Till the day I left the side room, which was about 4 months. And one of the doctors proceeded to tell us it was costing £500 a week.
It is crazy. It is crazy. I mean, even the bit that I was involved in, I was just covering someone's maternity leave, but I couldn't believe the sheer incompetence of the whole thing. I'm not knocking the NHS, because the NHS as a whole is bloody brilliant.
Oh God, yeah.
And the people that are at the front line and the nurses and the people that are actually doing the work are brilliant. I'm talking about the hordes of people higher and higher up who seem to be just...
But there needs to be someone on each ward that manages that sort of thing.
Absolutely. The matron, I believe, would have been
whoever it is,
in charge.
They just seem to walk past the things, and you know what I mean? Well, they need to make sure that these things are being used, and because otherwise it's just, as you said, totally wasteful. And I mean, in any area of work, there is those who go above and beyond, those who do the job, and those who don't. And I saw that with nurses, doctors, HCs, porters, cleaning staff, you name it. I saw it with all of them when I was in there. But
you would have done. All that time, you would have been up for notice.
Yeah, they have ward sisters now, don't they? The wards have a sister.
That's right. And people who are not in hospital but still have a number of conditions that are being treated individually, and that may include mental health issues as well. But being treated for something to do with their kidneys, something to do with another organ, something, and they're literally treated. There's no communication. They are literally just treated as parts. It's not right, really. But and mental health is worse because it doesn't fall into a neat department with people who know what they're doing. They clearly don't.
And because every person is different, even if there is similar even if there's similar issues with similar symptoms, you know what I mean, like, but still everybody's I guess what starts their mental health is all different, because we've all had different lives, you know what I mean.
Precisely. When I was working as a hypnotherapist, certain things would certain conditions or symptoms would present themselves very commonly. Lack of confidence, anxiety, panic attacks, fears, bad dreams, all those kinds of things. And if someone may have been diagnosed as depressed, and then they tell their story, and you think, well, it's hardly bloody surprising you're depressed. You've got all this going on, plus a whole raft of things from the past. And it's all that stuff from the past that has to be gently unpicked and resolved. And that's never going to be the same. No two people are ever the same.
Yeah, and then also it's the time that can take. Because as I explained to you, I had bereavement counselling, 6 sessions, which lasted an hour each, which were on the phone. And unfortunately, it didn't really help, because Not really, because I don't see how like they can put it in a box like that, because everyone, I mean, I'm all right, don't get me wrong, but someone could need 16 weeks, someone could need 2 weeks, someone could need a year. You know what I mean? It doesn't. How can you put it in a box as to how long time frame you get? You know what I mean? Surely it's just until things start to improve.
Well, that's right. I mean, 6 weeks is a very minimal time to even begin to scratch the surface. The fact that somebody may get a lot of benefit from 6 weeks because they finally get to talk to someone, but also when it's offered, it's no good offering someone bereavement counselling straight after they've lost someone, because there's a time when someone feels ready to then talk about it, and that's usually not in the immediate aftermath of losing somebody. So, there's a lot of subtlety to it, and I think it's lost sometimes.
I think Lisa was saying something about her uncle, was it? They tried to give my uncle medication he wasn't allowed to take because of his heart condition. 3 different nurses, it could have killed him. The consultant went mad. It's really shocking, isn't it?
But that is not staggeringly uncommon. Again, I know somebody who they wanted her to take certain things for one condition. Admittedly, she would have had a file, about as high as my house, quite possibly.
Yeah.
But they don't look. And it's like, you can't take that because she's taking this, because she's got this going on. You can't give her that. Joined up working is what really needs to happen. And that, as you say, does need people to help manage it. But people shouldn't be treated as body parts or, oh, well, that's a psychological issue, so that's nothing to do with us. There should be a more holistic, for the want of a better word, actually looking at it as a whole person rather than just pieces.
Definitely.
Well, Nick's in the house. He's late.
Hi, Nick. Don't say my partner used to be the matron on the ward in the 80s and 90s.
Wow. Yeah. I think, it was commonly held that to have someone whose responsibility was to look after a ward tended to ensure that things happened in the right way, and that everyone knew what they were supposed to be doing and just bloody well got on with it. Yeah. I mean, the number of times you go into a hospital and it's like, well, they need to take your blood pressure or hook you up for the pulse, and they haven't got the machine there. They're kind of running around trying to find a spare machine. It's like, oh, for goodness sake.
Yeah.
Those sort of machines are essential. The great big machines aren't always what's needed. On failing that, someone can do it manually. They don't have to always have the machine. They can do it in other ways.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Lisa's saying that ordering stationery and other supplies, etc., from particularly expensive suppliers are to make the mates money. My friend, she used to, she managed a set of doctors, like in part of the mental health side, and they could only order from the NHS website, like supplies, whatever it was. So it would be all these things. And she said you could go to the pound shop and spend £50 on the same thing you pay £500 for.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
I think there was the roll of tapes. You could get £1 each in the pound shop, and there were £10 on this thing that she had to buy. She used to go mad, but they had no choice.
I remember that too. I do remember that, the whole sort of logistics arm of the NHS and the money making and the specialist printers, and everything has to be reprinted because somebody rebrands. And no, I remember all that. I was astounded. I only actually worked within the NHS because I was on secondment. I never used to have one job. I always had a job, then I seconded somewhere else, and then I went somewhere else, and I was doing this whole round and ended up working there. But yeah, it horrified me. I have to say, I was absolutely horrified. And that was 16 years ago, because that was just before the last job I had before I stopped and had my son. So I was heavily pregnant. So I used to sort of swing into the meeting, kind of like a ship in full sail, trying to sort them all out.
There was a question I thought of before, which was to do with mental health, which was so if we take someone who's done something like murder, serial killers, or whatever, someone like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you think that someone is born evil, or is it like just their mental health that causes them to be that way?
Well, there's clearly something slightly different about the way their brain is wired.
Mm-hmm.
Is that an illness? Possibly, but again, I very much doubt that any two serial killers would have the same process or justification.
Yeah, it'd be different. I guess.
Yeah, it's like, why do people do anything? I mean, they obviously think they're doing the right thing, because people don't do something unless they think it's for a reason. But yeah, how twisted and crazy that can be. I'm not sure people are born evil. I'm not entirely sure of it. I do think they can become very damaged and very twisted, enough to do some horrendous things. And actually, I don't think that it's easy to say, it's only those people who say, oh, but I actually think we all have a capacity for cruelty and for bad behaviour, shall I say. I just think for most of us, the pressure of being in society and having, and not, fear of being caught actually is probably more keeps people in line than anything else, certainly for small and petty crime. But most murders are to do with passion and emotions anyway. They're not about cold-blooded.
I guess when I suppose maybe like more serial killers really, where it's more of a specific thing, you know what I mean, and even like the way they leave the body and the things that they do is that it's got to be something that's going on mentally, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's quite often ritualized, or there's a pattern.
Yeah.
And they may be, psychopaths, and have absolutely no regard for human life at all.
No empathy, as Joan's saying.
But that, I mean, again, is that nature or nurture? I don't think we'll ever find out. It's possible that for some people they may be born that way, but for a lot of people, I think there's going to be an element of nurture in there as well, or lack of nurture, quite possibly. Yeah.
It was just something that occurred to me. I mean, I know that's a complete far cry from, in general, most people. That, anxiety and depression and those things. It's kind of completely away from that, I guess.
Well, it's an extreme form, yeah.
But it was just something that came across my mind as to, like, if that's mental illness, would there have been a point beforehand where that would have, if there was the right services in place?
Yeah, could it be prevented?
Could it be prevented?
Could someone not get there? I think it would be an on-balance thing. I reckon in some cases, yes, quite possibly it could be, but probably not in every case. Probably not in every case.
No.
It's interesting though. Yes, the lack of empathy is chilling. Yeah,
very chilling.
That's not what humanity is about, or supposed to be about.
No, not at all. We've gone everywhere at the minute. I've gone with the NHS.
The incompetence of the NHS to
psychopaths, yeah. But if anyone has anything they want to ask or they want to discuss or whatever, please put it in the comments. I wasn't very prepared because I normally have questions, but I haven't got my questions.
Elaine has it's organised. I'm not. I'm winging it as usual. I suppose. Sorry.
I was just going to say, have you ever suffered with depression yourself, or anything? So I haven't really.
I certainly have. It was a long time ago. After I'd had many years ago, I had a run-in with breast cancer, as people who know me will know, and I did recover from it. But what happened is you get back to normal, and then your brain starts going, well, what the hell was that all about? What's normal? if I just keep doing the same thing, that obviously wasn't good for me. I that's when my brain started to go into sort of some quite dark places. But you get thrown into a dark place when you have something that's a serious illness anyway.
Yeah.
But then to come out of it and start to question everything you ever thought was right, it did. It certainly put me in a tailspin, and I definitely hit. I was about a year after my treatment. No, maybe less actually. About between 6 and 9 months after, when my treatment had finished. So I really did sort of hit the decks. I'd had my chemotherapy. I was sent away. You're okay. You're fine. And then it was like, yeah, but what that bleeding neck was all that about? I was 30.
Yeah. Was there no support for that as well at the time?
No, not really.
Nothing.
Very little. There is more now, thankfully, because I think there's been a lot more campaigning and people are more aware of it. And I did my best to help with that. But yeah, there was precious little. I did actually go and see a hypnotherapist to try and regain some of my balance and to sort of get myself back to me. And it was through doing that I then decided to train as a hypnotherapist.
Yeah.
So, that sort of changed everything, because I knew I didn't want to go back to just being like I was. I wasn't enjoying it anymore. I had a bad experience with the company I was with, and they were very not understanding of what I was going through, to say the least. So I was quite pleased that I could take control of the situation and actually learn something new, do something that was, if I give people what I'd received from the treatment, and that was just absolutely coming back to where I wanted to be, then and that's why I did hypnotherapy for about 20 years after that. So, and I had depression. I had antidepressants. They helped me level out while I went for my hypnotherapy, and then I stopped taking those very quickly. I was only on them for a couple of months. I didn't want to stay on them. I knew I didn't want to stay on them. But,
I suppose it must, because if you go through something like that, you have to deal with that at the time. So because you're dealing with it at the time, in the sense of you're going through it, you're not dealing with it, is what I mean. Is you're going through it because it's happening to you. So you have that to focus on. So I guess it's that afterwards, as you said, that it kind of hits you.
That's when you suddenly think, bloody hell, what the hell have I been through this last year? And, what have I been through? And all those people who know me have been through. And you see the fear it casts out. It's extraordinary what it does to people. You certainly find out who your friends are when you're not well.
Yeah.
That much is sure. You really do. But so I did struggle with it. And it shocked me because I've always been a bit up and down and a bit sort of all over the place sometimes, and a bit scatty-minded, but it really floored me. But once I realised I could do something about it, which was pretty quick, then everything changed for the better.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't realise I had depression when I had depression, if that makes sense, because I always blame myself for everything anyway. So it was kind of like, I just thought everything was me.
Yeah, and you think something's wrong with me. What's wrong with me?
Yeah, it was just me. Yeah. And so I didn't even realise. But it was very dark for a long time, actually. In fact, I think I described it once as like being at the bottom of a dark hole and having no ladder to get back up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You just couldn't get out of it. And nothing was positive, you know what I mean? Like everything was negative, I guess, and I couldn't.
And even fragile, I think, feeling so fragile all the time that the smallest thing could really upset, knock you off balance.
Totally.
That for me was very tough, because that's just not how I am. That's not who I was or how I am. So I just found it so odd to be so at the mercy of my emotions and vulnerable. Really, I felt very vulnerable, and I was actually bullied at my workplace, and I hadn't got the strength to fight back. I'd had radiotherapy. I was in chemotherapy. I'd had 2 operations.
Yeah.
I was floored. You know, the fact that I was getting to work was quite astonishing.
Amazing.
Yeah, you know, even now I just think, oh man, if I could go back and give them the slap.
Yeah, that's always the same thing. It's always the
Yeah.
thing, isn't it? If you wish you could go back and, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. Yes, they're not. It's not forgotten. Karma will get them. Here's James made an interesting point here too. She wonders if mental health problems are a product of modern times. That is, getting worse as we get more intelligent, as we understand the brain and the mind more. We still know so little, though. I think the kind of modern living and the pressures that people are under now do tend to exacerbate it. That thing of comparing yourself to other people. You know, we've got Instagram, we've got Facebook.
Social media, yeah. So
people have to seem to be living a glorious life, and life can be very unglamorous from time to time. And I think those kinds of pressures do stack things up. The way we work, the stresses involved, a lot of stress is caused through having no control over your life. Huge amounts of it are caused by not actually being able to effect change yourself, by always being at the mercy of someone else's usually very poor decision making.
I totally understand that.
Yeah, a lack of autonomy, a lack of independence. It's so crucial to who we are as human beings. And our brains haven't evolved as quickly as our society has. So we still want the freedoms and we still have needs and wants to not be put into boxes. Just churning out work, which, yeah. So, yeah, I think there's a huge amount of the fact that modern times don't suit our brains as well as we might think they do.
Yeah.
And like you say, pressures like with COVID, people having to live indoors, having to be in close contact with their family members, you know, who normally you could just say, I'm going for a walk and avoid.
Yeah.
It became all more pressured, having to fulfill roles you wouldn't normally, like parents having to teach kids. You know, it's like
what's the words? My brain's just gone.
It's called a brain fart.
Yeah, domestic abuse apparently rose loads over the lockdown period.
Yeah,
it's
horrific,
horrible to think, but
yeah, and that's so destructive, and it will erode anyone's sense of self to be being treated badly by someone else, and not being able to get away. And again, I've known plenty of people who've had these situations, even outside of COVID times, but it's ramped it up tenfold. Yeah.
Susan, I had therapy in my 40s for depression, and after some long discussions, my therapist said I almost certainly had undiagnosed depression for a number of years in my teens after my father died. Her saying that helped me make sense of a lot of things that had gone on back then. Yeah, definitely. Well, I think the same for me, because I got told that my eating was connected to the deaths of my grandparents when I was 10. And I never connected it before. It made sense. But yeah.
I think a lot of it is, I mean, I lost my mother when I was 13, and that, you know, although you crack on and get on with stuff because that's what people did back then. Yes, I certainly, the therapy I had in my sort of 30s and 40s really helped me to understand them. Of course, that has a massive impact. It's like, and yet, and back in at that time, it was literally you just carried on as normal. You just kept going and coped with it.
Yeah.
So yeah, and we don't always cope as well as we think we do, or we cope or appear to, and then it's later on it will surface.
Yeah.
You know? So yeah, and I'm sure that probably underpinned the stuff that came up for me many years later, because it goes round and round.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, Susan saying the modern world is so toxic to our health, both physically and mentally.
Yeah. Yeah. It's much more. People are kind of put into little roles, you know, put into boxes, and most of us really don't want to be like that. Can't live like that.
No.
Jones made a good point, though. She said, well, we used to live in tribes and communities, and now we don't know our neighbours. We're social animals, and that's why talking and sharing helps so much. And I couldn't agree more. I think you have to find your tribe, all tribes. Communities, I think, have got a bit more emphasis, particularly during COVID, because people did tend to get to know people a bit more, I think, locally and what have you. Certainly the community I'm looking out on here in my little crescent has become quite a really good community. Engaged when they weren't going to work and they were more based, they sort of looked out for each other more. So I'm hoping maybe people appreciate that side of life and bring more of it back in. And of course, talking and sharing like we're doing here on social media, and that, as well as with your friends, and that is so vital. It does show the load, doesn't it? It just kind of, you think, you're not the only one who thinks that way.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, like I said, when I was young, I just thought it was me. I didn't think I had anything. I didn't think there was things wrong with this. I just thought it was who I was. And so therefore I couldn't share it with anyone. I couldn't talk about it because it was kind of like, you know what I mean? It was like showing them a monster in a sense, because that's how I viewed myself. I really did, like, not just physically, but because I did it physically with the body dysmorphia, it then become mentally as well. So then I thought, oh, well, I must be a horrible person if I'm like this, and I must be, do you know what I mean? And obviously this started from when I was really young. And I mean that, and there was no social media then. So now it must be even harder. Like, I can't even imagine having a sort of, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, social media, as we say, can work for good in terms of finding people who have got similar things going on to you and being able to talk about it, especially someone who's maybe come through it a little further along, who can act as a mentor and a guide. But yes, the sheer pressure on people to conform or look a certain way or behave a certain way, and this whole thing is of people wanting to present their very best self. It's like, oh, I've got to present this lovely image. And rather than the reality that, we're messy, mixed up, confused human beings. That's who we are.
Yeah.
And we all have aspects of ourselves we don't like very much. We all have things that we can go, yeah, that's all right. Yeah, to accept it. Oh, pardon me, that's my sausage and mash coming back. Excuse me.
I think also with, camera phones and videos and all that as well, that it puts even more pressure because, people video and take pictures of other people and put that up on social media and stuff that can be harmful.
Oh, yeah. And there's so much judging that goes on. And that's usually someone who's judging somebody else and going, oh, they're this. It's usually because they feel that about themselves. It's usually protection, actually.
I think we're all guilty of judging sometimes, you know what I mean? Because we don't really know. And I think we can all do it. I mean, I would never, ever say anything to someone, it's that kind of thing though, isn't it? It's like you cross the line, but then also I've judged someone in my own head and thought something and then found out something further down the line and thought, and that makes sense. And then I felt really bad for thinking that, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or whatever. But that's the thing. So I would never, ever, go and tell someone that or go and write it somewhere on the internet or whatever. Because it's just, yeah.
Yeah, people's mental health is affected on the internet because of what people write or comments they make. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of people YouTube, like, you're going to get comments. You're going to get a lot of people saying lovely things, and there'll be one person who says something that's just not right, and it's that one thing that hurts. It's that one thing that someone takes notice of, and that really upsets me, because you've got good people who are trying to share things on the internet and who are trying to do the right thing and help other people, and they get slaughtered for it. And that the person who's typed that has obviously got their own stuff going on. They're projecting shit out into the universe, and yet they would never say that to that a person's face. That's cowardice of the highest order.
Totally wouldn't ever. I mean, I've had the odd comments, you know what I mean, like that have been derogatory, as you would say, or whatever. Always about my weight, of course. To be honest, that doesn't bother me, actually. It doesn't. And it would have at one point, and maybe it would if like hundreds of people were doing it, then it might fit. But like the odd comment now and again, I can cope with, just block them. Sometimes
Yeah.
I just find them like I'll respond with something funny because that's just how I feel. Do you know what I mean? But in the most part, I just block them because, yeah, it's not worth it. But yeah, to have if it was like an everyday thing that was constant, then I think it would affect me because I think it would only be normal that would affect you, wouldn't it?
Well, exactly. And it is that our tendency to spot the one bad thing.
Yeah.
There can be lots of good comments, but it's the negative thing that we'll notice because that's kind of part of the human condition, isn't it?
Yeah.
But when I see that the impact that can have on people's mental health, and I have seen that on occasion, it really infuriates me.
Totally.
People might appear to be, saying, "Oh, you must be thick-skinned if you're prepared to talk on YouTubes or Instagram, whatever it is." Not necessarily. It's not crediting people with a full range of emotions where they're going to think that hurts.
Yeah.
Do it. Yeah, yeah. So, yes, it's a bit of a situation, but one can only hope that the more that it's talked about, the more that people share, that it can lessen the pain of some of this stuff, and that people realise that it's so much a part of all of us. We've all got our mental health issues. There isn't a person in this world who hasn't got something going on at some point in their life.
I mean, I have mentioned like how bad mine got to the point of like serious thoughts that were wrong. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
thought I died. I actually thought I died. And logically, I was looking in the back of my, and you know how your phone screen's black if you're not like, if it's not on, kind of
Oh,
thing.
yeah, yeah.
Well, I was looking at that and I couldn't see myself blink. That's what it was. You can't see yourself blink because you shut your eyes. But logically, my logic had gone completely,
Yeah.
and
You were in the bad place.
I could not work it out. And I remember being horrified, like doing this to my face and eyes because I was so horrified at the thought. And then in my head, I was going, I've died. And then I was like, oh my God, I've died. And then it was February at the time. I was in hospital and it was freezing. And so I was like, that's why the room's cold. Do you know what I mean? And all these logic,
Yeah.
like,
Adding two and two together.
yeah, I was adding two and two together, making, and then I was like, well, why am I still here? Why am I still here? Why am I still here? And then I was like, because I was a bad person, and so therefore, and you know the film Ghost.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, the ghoul things come for the bad people from up under the ground.
Oh.
Well, that's what I had in my head. I was absolutely terrified, and I lay in the bed, and I remember this. I was gripping the bed, like looking up at the ceiling, and the right, because I had terrible, like at the time I was having terrible anxiety. It was constant, and the sort of rush of anxiety that came up from your feet and up to your head and back.
Wow.
And it was horrible. I was going hot and cold. I was obviously gripping the bed, and I mean eventually it became morning, you know what I mean, and obviously I was still there, and I was so confused. And I mean I'll probably explain a bit more next time because we're like running out of time. But yeah, that was one of the things in it. I think it went on for 2 or 3 weeks, this extreme, like,
Wow.
I think I literally hit the bottom. I think that was the point. I literally hit the bottom.
Yeah. So there was only one way to go from there. Come back up again.
Come back up again.
Wow. What a horrible experience, though. But
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, it can
very
be.
terrifying.
Yeah, yeah.
Very terrifying.
Yes. And the will to live is so incredibly strong. It gets you back. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, that's a real note to finish on, isn't it? That's yeah. It shows you how like I say, how mucked up your thoughts can get.
I couldn't talk about it at the time, which I couldn't speak about it at the time, but now I can, because I feel like I want to, because I want other people to realize how bad it can get and that you can still come back from that. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, you can,
and that it is possible to be okay. afterwards.
Yeah.
It was
We really
because
came from the brink. Yes.
yeah, definitely. But we'll talk about it more next week anyway.
We will. We'll continue. And if all of you would like to join us next week, that will be absolutely lovely. So thank you to the lovely Eleni. And goodbye from me, and we'll see you. Oh, Jilly B, hello. We're just going. Really sorry.
We'll see you next week on my channel at 7:30 again.
Next week on Laney's. Bye-bye now. Thank you for joining us. Bye.